Commander Velthar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the blue planet grow larger on his screens. Earth looked peaceful from space. White clouds swirled over green and brown land masses. The ocean sparkled in the light of the yellow star. It looked like many other worlds the Catherian Empire had conquered. "Commander," his aide reported, "we are receiving more transmissions from the planet's surface." Velthar nodded. His 6 eyes studied the data flowing across his command console. The humans were still broadcasting their primitive signals into space. Radio waves, television programs, and digital communications painted a picture of a young species barely capable of space travel. Their weapons were crude. Their technology was simple. This would be another easy victory for the Empire. "What do our intelligence reports say about their military strength?" Velthar asked. His aide, a young Catherian named Zektar, pulled up the files. "Very limited, Commander. They have flying machines they call aircraft, but they are slow and primitive. Their ground forces use basic projectile weapons. They have no energy shields, no plasma cannons, no gravitational manipulation devices. Most importantly, they have no faster-than-light travel capabilities." Velthar made a sound that was the Catherian equivalent of laughter. In 47 conquered worlds, he had never faced a species this backward. The Empire's war machines could level entire cities in minutes. Their personal armor could stop anything these humans might throw at them. Their energy weapons could cut through the strongest metals these primitives could create. On Earth, Captain Dae-Ho Kim sat in the Defense Coordination Center in Seoul. He had been watching the strange objects in space for 3 days now. The objects were too large to be asteroids and moved in patterns that suggested intelligence. Other military bases around the world reported similar sightings. Everyone knew what this meant, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. "Sir," Lieutenant Woo Jin Park approached his desk. "We're getting more reports from the space monitoring stations. The objects are definitely artificial. They're moving into orbit around our planet." Dae-Ho rubbed his tired eyes. He had been a soldier for 20 years, but this was beyond anything in his training. "Have we tried to communicate with them?" "Dr. Boram Lee at the research center has been trying to send messages on multiple frequencies. So far, no response." Across the city, Dr. Boram Lee sat surrounded by computers and radio equipment. She had devoted her career to studying the possibility of alien life. Now that it was actually happening, she felt both excited and terrified. The radio telescopes were picking up transmissions from the objects in space. The signals were complex and clearly intelligent, but she could not understand them. "The pattern analysis shows they're definitely communications," she told her assistant. "But the language structure is completely unknown. I'm running it through every decryption program we have." What Dr. Boram did not know was that the aliens were already listening to Earth's communications. The Catherians had technology that could translate most languages within hours. They were learning about human society by monitoring television broadcasts, internet traffic, and government communications. Back on the command ship, Velthar reviewed the translation reports. The humans called their world Earth. They were divided into many different groups called nations. They fought wars among themselves using primitive weapons. Their population was spread across the planet's surface in settlements they called cities. "Commander," Zektar reported, "our analysts have found something strange in their communications." "What kind of strange?" "They frequently discuss what they call weather events. Apparently their planet experiences regular atmospheric disturbances that they treat as normal occurrences." Velthar looked at the data. The humans casually mentioned something called hurricanes, which appeared to be massive atmospheric storms with wind speeds that would tear apart Catherian buildings. They talked about earthquakes as if the ground regularly shook beneath their feet. They mentioned floods, tornadoes, and temperature variations that would require full environmental suits for his people to survive. This must be primitive exaggeration, Velthar decided. Weak species often create myths about their environment to make themselves seem stronger. But the environmental data from their own sensors told a different story. Earth's atmosphere was more violent than anything in Catherian experience. The planet's surface temperature varied by extremes that would kill most galactic species. The atmospheric pressure at sea level was crushing by the standards of most civilized worlds. The gravity was stronger than the Catherian homeworld. "Sir," the ship's science officer reported, "I'm reading massive electrical activity in the planet's atmosphere. Lightning strikes are occurring thousands of times per minute across the surface. The humans appear to be living directly underneath this electrical bombardment." Belthar studied the readings with growing confusion. Lightning was a phenomenon that most spacefaring species encountered only in the most dangerous regions of space. Yet these humans lived under skies that regularly exploded with electrical energy. Their cities were built in areas where lightning struck the ground repeatedly. And Commander, the science officer continued, the planet's surface is highly unstable. The land masses are constantly moving. They call these movements earthquakes and seem to consider them routine events. In Seoul, Captain Dae-ho Kim was dealing with more immediate concerns. The morning weather report predicted a typhoon would hit the coast in 2 days. This was normal for the season, but it meant they would have to factor severe weather into their defense plans. Lieutenant Park, he called, make sure our aircraft are secured before the storm hits. We can't afford to lose planes to weather if we need to respond to whatever those things in space are planning. Lieutenant Woojin Park nodded. Growing up in Korea, he had experienced dozens of typhoons. They were dangerous but predictable. You prepared for them, rode them out, and cleaned up afterward. It never occurred to him that beings from another world might consider such storms to be weapons of mass destruction. Dr. Boram Lee was making progress with the alien transmissions. The patterns were becoming clearer, though she still could not understand the meaning. What worried her was the tone of the communications. Even without understanding the words, she could hear something in the signals that sounded like fear. Above them all, Commander Velthar prepared his invasion force. 47 worlds had fallen to his fleet. Earth would be number 48. The fact that the planet seemed more hostile than most was simply another challenge to overcome. His warriors were the finest in the galaxy. A few atmospheric disturbances would not stop them. He had no idea that he was about to encounter the most terrifying force in the known universe. Humans who called a death world home and considered it normal. The first Catherian scouts landed in Seoul just as the morning rush hour began. Their small reconnaissance ships touched down in Han River Park, expecting to encounter a primitive settlement that would cower at their superior technology. Instead, they found something that made no sense according to their understanding of civilized life. Scout leader Kexval emerged from his ship wearing full environmental armor. His sensors immediately began screaming warnings. The atmospheric pressure was crushing. The oxygen levels were toxic. The gravity was trying to pull him through the ground. Yet as he looked around, he saw soft-skinned bipeds walking around without any protection at all. A human child ran past his ship, chasing a small animal. The child was breathing the poisonous atmosphere as if it were nothing. Kexval checked his readings again. The air contained enough oxygen to cause combustion in Catherian lungs. The pressure was 3 times what his species considered safe. The gravity would crush most galactic species within hours, yet this small human moved as if weightless. Base, this is Scout Team 1, Kexval reported into his communicator. The environmental readings must be wrong. The natives are surviving in conditions that should kill them instantly. In a nearby elementary school, Haewon Choi was starting her morning lesson with 38 first-grade students. She had taught at this school for 10 years and had developed routines for dealing with Seoul's frequent minor earthquakes. As she began writing on the board, the ground gave a small tremor. Earthquake position. Everyone, she said calmly. The children immediately dropped to their knees, covered their heads with their hands, and got under their desks. They had practiced this drill hundreds of times. To them, it was as normal as lining up for lunch. The tremor lasted 15 seconds, then stopped. Okay, back to your seats, Haewon said with a smile. Now who can tell me what 3 plus 4 equals? Outside the school, Kexval's motion sensors detected the seismic activity. His equipment classified it as a significant geological event that would require immediate evacuation procedures on any civilized world. But these humans barely seemed to notice. The small ones had performed some kind of protective ritual, then continued with their daily activities as if the ground regularly tried to shake them to death. Across the city, construction worker Taimin Zhang was operating a crane 40 stories above the street. Dark clouds were gathering overhead, and his weather radio was reporting an approaching thunderstorm. Rain began to fall and lightning started flashing in the distance. On most worlds, electrical storms required all outdoor activities to cease immediately. Lightning was a force that could destroy starships. Yet Taman simply put on a plastic hat and continued working. His supervisor had checked the lightning detection system and determined the storm was not close enough to be dangerous. They would keep working until the lightning was within 5 kilometers, then take a 30-minute break. Kexval monitored the electrical activity building in the atmosphere above the city. His ship's computer calculated that each lightning bolt carried enough energy to power a Cytherian city for a full day. Hundreds of these energy discharges were forming every minute. The humans should have been evacuating to underground shelters. Instead, they were putting on thin plastic coverings and continuing their normal activities. "Base, the natives appear to be immune to electrical energy," he reported. "They are not seeking shelter from what our sensors classify as a massive energy weapon bombardment." In the mountains outside Seoul, Mi Young-shin was preparing for a rescue training exercise. She worked for the Mountain Rescue Service and was used to operating in Korea's harsh winter conditions. The temperature was -15 degrees Celsius and snow was falling steadily. Wind speeds were 30 kilometers per hour. According to her equipment, these were normal conditions for a December training day. She put on her cold weather gear, checked her climbing equipment, and began hiking up the mountain trail. Behind her, 12 other rescue volunteers followed, chatting and joking as they climbed. Kexval's long-range sensors detected the humans moving through the frozen environment. His computer analyzed the conditions and determined that any Cytherian exposed to such temperatures would die within minutes, even with full environmental suits. Yet these humans were actually choosing to enter the deadly environment voluntarily. His translator indicated they were making sounds associated with enjoyment. By noon, Kexval had documented dozens of impossible human behaviors. He watched office workers eat their lunch outside, while the atmospheric pressure tried to crush them. He saw children playing games in gravitational conditions that would snap Cytherian bones. He observed humans consuming liquid water at temperatures that would freeze Cytherian blood solid. "Base, I need to speak with Commander Velthar immediately," he reported. On the command ship, Velthar received the report with growing confusion. "You're telling me they survive in Class-Duthine environmental conditions without technological assistance?" "Not just survive, Commander. They appear to thrive. I watched infant humans playing in conditions that would require our most advanced life support systems. They treat seismic activity as a minor inconvenience. They work outdoors during electrical storms that could destroy our ships." Velthar studied his environmental data again. According to Galactic Council classifications, Earth was indeed a Class-Duthine death world. Such planets were considered uninhabitable by any known species. They were typically used as prison colonies or weapons testing facilities, and even then, only with extensive environmental modifications. Yet intelligence reports showed that over 7 billion humans lived on Earth's surface without environmental suits, underground bunkers, or atmospheric processors. They had built their cities directly on the hostile surface and somehow survived there for thousands of years. Dr. Boram. Lee was monitoring alien communications from her research facility when she detected a change in transmission patterns. The signals from space were becoming more frequent and seemed to contain more urgency. Her computer translation programs were beginning to identify emotional markers in the alien language. "That's strange," she told her assistant. "The emotional indicators suggest fear, but that doesn't make sense. Why would an advanced alien civilization capable of interstellar travel be afraid of us?" What she didn't know was that Commander Velthar was experiencing something unprecedented in Cytherian military history. His scouts were reporting that the enemy was not just surviving in impossible conditions, but treating those conditions as normal daily life. His tactical computers could not process how to fight beings that lived comfortably in an environment that would kill his soldiers in minutes. Lieutenant Woojin Park was conducting a routine weather reconnaissance flight when his radar detected unknown aircraft entering Seoul's airspace. He changed course to investigate, flying his F-16 through the edge of the thunderstorm that was still passing over the city. To Park, flying through stormy weather was challenging but normal. His aircraft was designed for it, and he had trained for such conditions dozens of times. He adjusted for turbulence, avoided the worst of the lightning, and maintained his course toward the unknown contacts. Kexval watched in terror as a primitive human aircraft flew directly through the electrical energy storm. The pilot was deliberately entering conditions that would destroy any Cytherian vessel. Yet the crude machine continued flying as if electrical bombardment was nothing more than a minor navigation hazard. "Commander," he radioed, "one of their flying machines just passed through the energy storm without taking damage. I don't understand how their primitive technology can survive what our shields cannot handle." For the first time in his military career, Commander Velthar felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. His invasion force was designed to conquer civilized worlds inhabited by rational species that avoided dangerous environments. But these humans seemed to have weaponized their own planet and didn't even realize it. As the day ended, Kexaval transmitted his final report. "Commander, I recommend we classify this species as a Class 9 threat or higher. They have adapted to survive in conditions that exceed our operational parameters. I don't believe we can successfully occupy a world where the environment itself is hostile to our existence." In Seoul, Haewon Choi finished her school day, Tai Min-jang completed his construction work despite the storm, and Mi Young-shin successfully completed her mountain rescue training. None of them knew that their normal daily activities had just paralyzed an invasion force that had conquered 47 worlds without significant resistance. Above them, Commander Velthar stared at his tactical displays and realized he might have made a terrible mistake. Dr. Bo Ramlee sat in her research facility at 3 in the morning, surrounded by computer screens showing alien communication patterns. She had been working for 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. What she had discovered made her hands shake as she typed her report. "The alien transmissions show clear signs of panic," she wrote. "Emotional stress markers in their communications have increased by 400% since their scouts landed. They're not behaving like conquerors. They're behaving like beings who have encountered something beyond their comprehension." Her translation software had finally broken through parts of the alien language. Words like impossible, death world, and abort mission kept appearing in their communications. Most disturbing was a phrase that kept repeating, "How do they survive?" On the coast of South Korea, farmer Kyung-soo-no was preparing his rice fields for the approaching typhoon season. Typhoon warnings had been posted for the next week, but this was normal for September. He had weathered dozens of these storms over his 40 years of farming. His fields were designed to handle flooding, his equipment was secured, and his family knew the evacuation procedures. As he checked the storm barriers around his property, he noticed strange metal objects in the sky. They were too high to be aircraft and too large to be satellites. He made a mental note to ask his son about them later. Right now he had more important things to worry about, like protecting his crops from winds that could reach 200 kilometers per hour. High above him, Catherian observation drones recorded his activities. The analysis reports sent to Commander Velthar were increasingly disturbing. The human was preparing for an atmospheric disturbance that would register as a planetary catastrophe on Catherian scales. Wind speeds of 200 kilometers per hour would tear apart most galactic cities. Yet this lone human was calmly making preparations to remain on the surface during the storm. "Sir," Scout Leader Kexval reported from his position overlooking Seoul, "I've been monitoring their information broadcasts. They call these atmospheric disturbances weather. They have daily reports predicting when and where these environmental disasters will occur." "Disasters?" Velthar asked. "That's what's strange, Commander. They don't treat them as disasters. They treat them as normal environmental conditions that require minor adjustments to daily activities." On the evening news, meteorologist Yoon Ji-han was giving the weekly weather forecast. She stood in front of a map showing a massive spiral of clouds approaching the Korean peninsula. To her viewers, this was routine information they used to plan their week. "Typhoon Balavan is expected to make landfall Tuesday morning," she reported with the same calm tone she used to discuss sunny weather. "Winds will reach 180 kilometers per hour, with heavy rainfall and possible flooding in coastal areas. Residents in affected zones should secure outdoor furniture and avoid unnecessary travel during peak wind conditions." She continued with a smile. "Temperatures will remain warm at 28 degrees Celsius, dropping to 22 overnight. Perfect weather for indoor activities while the storm passes through." Kexval listened to the broadcast through his translator and felt his 4 hearts racing. The human was describing conditions that would require planetary evacuation on any civilized world. 200-kilometer-per-hour winds were stronger than the exhaust from Catherian starship engines. Yet she was suggesting people simply stay indoors and treat it as an opportunity for leisure activities. Emergency responder Sang Woo. Ryu was conducting his monthly earthquake preparedness drill with his team in Busan. As team leader for natural disaster response, he had dealt with dozens of major events over his career. Earthquakes, floods, landslides, and typhoons were all part of his normal work routine. Remember, he told his team, a 6.0 earthquake requires immediate response protocols. Anything over 7.0 gets full disaster deployment. Below 5.0 we monitor and assist if requested, but most people can handle that level of shaking on their own. His team nodded and continued reviewing their equipment. They discussed response times, communication procedures, and resource allocation as if they were talking about any other job. To them, planning for events that could level cities was simply professional responsibility. The Catherian listening posts recorded every word. Their computers analyzed the conversation and determined that these humans regularly experienced seismic events that would destroy most space-capable civilizations. More disturbing, they had developed such efficient response systems that they could categorize disasters by intensity and deploy appropriate countermeasures. "Commander," the ship's xenobiologist reported, "I've completed analysis of the human physiology data. Their bone density is 3 times higher than galactic average. Their muscle structure suggests adaptation to high-gravity environments. Their cardiovascular systems are designed to function under extreme atmospheric pressure." Velthar studied the biological scans. "Are you saying they evolved on this death world?" "Not just evolved, sir. They've been shaped by it. Every system in their bodies is built to survive conditions that would kill us. Their very existence proves they've been living in a Class 2 environment for thousands of years." The implications were staggering. Most species develop space travel to escape the limitations of their home worlds. Humans had developed it while living comfortably on a planet that served as its own natural fortress. They weren't weak primitives seeking to explore the galaxy. They were Deathworld survivors who had mastered interstellar communication while treating environmental disasters as minor inconveniences. Dr. Boram. Lee intercepted a Catherian transmission that changed everything. Her translation software had finally decoded a full message between the alien command ship and their homeworld. "Hi, Command. This is Fleet Commander Velthar. We have encountered an unprecedented situation. The species known as humans inhabits a Class 13 death world without technological assistance. They have somehow adapted to survive in conditions that exceed our military operational parameters. Request immediate consultation with the Xenobiology Council." The response came 12 hours later. "Commander Velthar, confirm your assessment. Are you reporting that the target species lives naturally on a Class 13 world?" "Confirmed, High Command. They call these conditions normal weather and natural disasters. Their children play games in gravitational fields that would crush our warriors. They work outdoors during electrical storms that could destroy our fleet. They treat seismic activity as a minor scheduling inconvenience." There was a long pause before the next transmission. "Commander, Class 13 worlds are used as testing facilities for our most extreme military equipment. We have never encountered a species capable of natural survival in such environments. Recommend immediate tactical reassessment." Captain Daeho Kim received Dr. Boram Lee's translation report at dawn. After reading it twice, he called an emergency meeting of the Defense Coordination Council. The implications were clear. The aliens weren't afraid of human technology or military might. They were afraid of humans themselves. According to their communications, Dr. Boram explained to the assembled officers, they classify our world as uninhabitable. They can't understand how we survive here, let alone thrive. Their own species requires extensive life support just to visit planets with our atmospheric conditions. Lieutenant Woojin Park raised his hand. "So they're not planning to invade because they can't survive here long term?" "It's more than that," Dr. Boram replied. "They're starting to realize that any species tough enough to call Earth home might be too dangerous to fight. We're not primitives to them anymore. We're Deathworld survivors who somehow developed civilization while living in conditions that would exterminate most galactic species." As the meeting continued, none of the humans fully grasped what they represented to the wider galaxy. They couldn't understand that their casual acceptance of earthquakes, their ability to work during thunderstorms, and their comfort in crushing atmospheric pressure made them living nightmares to most spacefaring species. To them, Earth was simply home. To the Catherians, it was beginning to look like humanity had weaponized an entire planet and didn't even realize it. "Commander." Velthar stared at his tactical displays and came to a conclusion that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. Perhaps some worlds were not meant to be conquered. Commander Velthar had not slept in 36 hours. His command center was filled with reports that made no sense according to everything the Catherian Empire knew about warfare and conquest. Each new observation of human behavior sent his tactical computers deeper into analysis loops they could not resolve. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we've intercepted human broadcasts about something they call extreme sports. The translator indicates these are recreational activities." "Show me," Velthar ordered. The main screen displayed footage of human Hyun-Woo Kang scaling a vertical rock face during a windstorm. The climbing conditions were so severe that Catherian sensors classified the wind speeds as structural damage threshold. Yet, this human was choosing to hang from a cliff in these conditions for entertainment. The environmental readings show wind speeds of 90 kilometers per hour, the science officer reported. Surface temperature is 4 degrees Celsius. The precipitation is freezing on contact with surfaces. This human is performing this activity voluntarily, with minimal protective equipment. Velthar watched in silence as Hyun-Woo completed his climb, then rappelled down the cliff face through the storm. The human's vital signs, intercepted through their communications devices, showed elevated heart rate consistent with enjoyment, not terror. He was having fun in conditions that would require full environmental suits and emergency medical support for any Catherian. "Sir, there's more," the communications officer continued. "We've identified hundreds of similar activities. They call them mountain climbing, deep-sea diving, skydiving, and extreme weather sports. They deliberately enter dangerous environments as forms of entertainment." The Psychological Warfare Division had stopped filing reports entirely. Their commanding officer, a veteran of 23 successful conquests, had submitted a formal request for psychiatric evaluation after watching humans participate in what they called winter swimming, voluntarily entering water at temperatures that would cause immediate organ failure in Catherians. On the coast near Busan, deep-sea fisher Ji Soo-yoon was preparing her boat for the day's work. The Weather Service had issued small craft advisories due to 3-meter swells and 40-kilometer winds, but these were normal working conditions for her crew. They had fished in much worse weather and considered today's forecast to be relatively calm. "Nets are secured," her first mate called out as they headed toward deeper water. "Weather looks good for a full day's work." Jisoo checked her instruments and nodded. The barometric pressure was dropping, which meant the weather might get rougher later, but they had several hours of fishing time before conditions became truly challenging. Her boat was designed to handle 5-meter swells, and her crew had worked in storms that would terrify most landlubbers. Above them, Catherian reconnaissance drones monitored their progress. The analysis reports filed by the observation team grew increasingly desperate. Human maritime vessel proceeding into oceanic conditions rated as severe hazard. Wave height exceeds safe operational parameters for our own atmospheric craft. Water temperature would cause hypothermia in Catherian physiology within minutes of exposure. Vessel crew showing no signs of distress or concern. 2 hours later, Jisoo and her crew were hauling in nets full of fish while their boat rode waves that would capsize most Catherian vessels. The humans worked steadily through conditions that required their observers to retreat to higher altitude to avoid structural damage to their surveillance equipment. In the northern mountains, Arctic researcher Dong-Hyun Oh was beginning his winter fieldwork season. Temperatures had dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius, and wind speeds were creating a wind chill factor of minus 50. According to his instruments, these were typical conditions for winter research in the Korean mountains. He put on his cold weather gear, loaded his equipment onto a snowmobile, and began his journey to the research station. Behind him, his team of graduate students followed on their own vehicles, chatting over the radio about their research projects as they traveled through conditions that would flash freeze Catherian body fluids. "Base camp. This is Research Team 5, Dong-Hyun radioed, proceeding to Station Charlie. Weather conditions are excellent for ice core sampling. Temperature holding steady at minus 32. Wind at 20 kilometers per hour. Should reach the site in 2 hours." The Catherian monitoring station recorded the transmission and added it to the growing file of impossible human activities. Their computers calculated that the described conditions would kill any known galactic species within minutes of exposure, even with full environmental protection. Yet these humans were traveling through such an environment in primitive vehicles, treating it as ideal working conditions. Lieutenant Woo Jin Park was conducting combat air patrol exercises when his flight encountered the massive typhoon that had been approaching the peninsula. Military protocol required aircraft to avoid severe weather, but Park's definition of severe had been shaped by growing up on a planet where typhoons were seasonal events. "Tower, this is Eagle Flight," he radioed. "Encountering outer bands of Typhoon Bolavin, winds at 120 kilometers per hour, visibility down to 2 kilometers. Maintaining patrol pattern. Roger, Eagle Flight. Continue mission unless conditions exceed operational limits." Park flew his F-16 through turbulence that would tear apart most Kytherian aircraft. To him, this was challenging flying that required skill and attention, but well within the capabilities of his aircraft and training. He had flown through dozens of such storms during his military career. The Kytherian fleet monitoring his flight path watched in growing panic as primitive human aircraft operated in atmospheric conditions that exceeded their own operational parameters. Their most advanced fighters could not survive in the storm that these humans were treating as routine military exercise. "Fleet Command," the observation commander reported, "Human military aircraft are operating in the typhoon. Their flight patterns suggest this is normal training activity, not emergency operations." Commander Velthar received the report and felt something he had never experienced in 40 years of military service: the complete breakdown of tactical doctrine. Every principle of warfare assumed that opposing forces had similar environmental limitations, but humans seemed to have no environmental limitations at all. His psychological warfare specialist had submitted a collective resignation. Their final report stated, "It is impossible to demoralize a species that treats class-defining environmental conditions as recreational opportunities. They voluntarily enter situations we classify as certain death scenarios. They cannot be intimidated by threats of environmental hardship because they have already mastered survival in conditions that exceed our ability to threaten." The intelligence division was equally baffled. "Sir, we've identified over 200 different human activities that involve deliberately entering dangerous environments. They call them hobbies, sports, jobs, and entertainment. Mountain climbing in electrical storms, diving to ocean depths that would crush our submarines, jumping from aircraft at high altitude, racing vehicles at speeds that would cause structural failure in our equipment." Velthar studied reports of humans who worked as storm chasers, deliberately driving toward tornadoes for scientific research and entertainment. He read about base jumpers who leaped from cliffs during high winds. He reviewed footage of surfers riding waves during winter storms in water cold enough to freeze Kytherian blood. "Sir," his aide Zektar approached hesitantly, "the crew is requesting permission to speak freely." "Granted. The men are asking if we're really planning to land ground forces on that planet. The environmental conditions alone would kill half our troops before they could deploy their equipment. And the humans—" He paused, searching for words. "What about the humans?" "Sir, they're not afraid of anything. How do you fight beings who think electrical storms are minor inconveniences? How do you intimidate creatures who go swimming in water that would kill us instantly? How do you conquer a species that has turned survival in a death world into a recreational activity?" Commander Velthar looked at his tactical displays showing the positions of his invasion fleet. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to understand that some battles could not be won through superior technology or overwhelming force. Some battles were lost before they began, when you realized you were facing beings so far beyond your understanding that conventional warfare became meaningless. Below them, humans continued their daily lives, completely unaware that their normal activities had paralyzed the most successful invasion fleet in galactic history. They went to work during storms, played games in crushing gravity, and raised their children in an environment that served as its own planetary defense system. Velthar was beginning to suspect that humanity had not just survived on a death world. They had been forged by it into something that defied every assumption about what intelligent life should be. The breaking point came when Commander Velthar witnessed what humans called a normal family weekend. On Saturday morning, the Chang family was preparing for their monthly camping trip in Sirexan National Park. Father Changmin Li loaded their hiking equipment into the family car while his two children, ages 8 and 12, excitedly checked their backpacks. His wife, Soonja Kim, reviewed the weather forecast on her phone. "Looks like rain tonight," she announced cheerfully. "Good thing we brought the waterproof tent." The weather forecast predicted temperatures dropping to 5 degrees Celsius, winds up to 50 kilometers per hour, and heavy rainfall throughout the night. To the Chang family, this was typical autumn camping weather in Korea. They had camped in much worse conditions and considered it part of the adventure. High above them, Kitherian observation satellites recorded the family's preparations. The environmental analysis sent to Commander Felthar's command center painted a picture of beings preparing to voluntarily enter a survival scenario that would require full military support for Kitherian forces, sir, the science officer reported, with barely controlled panic in his voice. A human family unit with juvenile members is deliberately entering an environment with sub-freezing temperatures, severe precipitation, and high wind speeds. They appear to be planning to remain outdoors overnight. For what purpose? Felthar asked, though he was beginning to dread the answer. According to their communications, entertainment, sir. They call it family bonding time. As the Chang family drove toward the mountains, 8-year-old Minseo Lee chatted excitedly about the hiking trail they would take. Dad, can we climb the rocky part even if it's raining? If the weather isn't too bad, Changmin replied. But if there's lightning, we'll stay in the tent until it passes. To the Kitherians monitoring the conversation, this was the most terrifying exchange they had yet recorded. The adult human was casually discussing exposing juveniles to electrical energy discharge, with weather intensity being the only limiting factor. They were treating potential lightning strikes as a minor scheduling consideration, rather than a lethal threat. In the mountain village where the Chang family would be camping, elderly resident Yu,